I actually didn't prepare any slides, Powers.
No, that's fine. We'll keep it the question format. So we are okay. So I just got a confirmation. So we are now live across Facebook and YouTube. And good afternoon, everyone. So as people join us, I would like to quickly introduce you to our speaker today. And we have a very special person with us today. So I have known Syna for a long time, and I wrote it today on my LinkedIn that one of the people from the ecosystem that I look up to truly as a mentor, as a guide, and a lot of times, when I just WhatsApp her some guidance, and she's always there, ready to help. So Syna is currently now the chief brand officer for Let's Venture, which I think everyone in the ecosystem is aware of. A company that helps startups raise funds, initially into early stage funds, and I think I correct me if I'm wrong, Syna. Now also helping startups raise the Series A, Series C, the later rounds also.
Yes.
And previously, Syna has been the features editor of CNBC TV 18. A lot of people would know her from Young Turks, the extremely popular show that she did for almost over a decade. So, Syna, thanks a lot for taking out time for us. Welcome to our session.
Thank you, Powers. Absolute pleasure being here, and I hope I'm useful to all of you today. And I'll try and keep my inputs today as real as possible because I think we can all go and read generic yarn everywhere. So I'll try and keep it as real as possible. And feel free to ask me any questions that you'll have.
Perfect. So I'll start with a few questions that I had in mind that I thought, because with the interaction that we had with startups related to our sessions and our program, some questions that I thought would be relevant, and then obviously we'll take the audience question that my team sends me from the Facebook and YouTube live if we get any from there. So first of all, the most obvious question considering the current scenario. So we recently, did a report and we were reading everything, and we saw that from giants, startup giants, from Policy Bazaar to Zomato, a lot of companies have cut down on their marketing expenses. So I mean, what do you think, is this going to be the new normal in startups, and how do you think the marketing is going to pan out for a lot of startups, both young and later stage? How is it going to change considering the pandemic that we are facing?
So typically, marketing spends, Powers, and for everyone else who's over here, is a cost center, right? I mean, it is, while now measuring the ROI or the return on your marketing dollar has gotten a lot better, correct?
Right.
Because there are a lot of, at least if you're on the online digital platforms, and that's where a significant budget is going into, at least over there is some returns. I mean, you can actually measure to a certain extent, correct? The returns that that every dollar spent is going to give you. But if you look at traditional media, correct? If you look at print, or you look at outdoor advertising, or you look at radio, or you look at television even, over there, the ambiguity, while it has gotten better, the ambiguity still remains, right? You can't really measure the outcomes of your marketing spends or your advertising spends on those channels. And therefore, over there, we will see, and we've already seen, a significant cut in terms of how much spending is happening on those platforms, right? So it's for traditional media, and looking at the number of news organizations, bureaus of newspapers and magazines that are shutting down across the country is a witness to that, because advertising has dried up. In the face of not having enough advertising, you can't meet payroll for your staff, and therefore you need to close down your bureaus and save costs. So you can almost immediately see that connect, correct? Advertising, people are conserving money, and on the other hand, you can see the repercussion that is having on media. Having said that, I do feel that startups, big or small, will try to conserve literally every dollar that they have, right? And therefore, they will become a lot more thoughtful about why they are spending money on any particular marketing channel, right? And they will become a lot more judicious, right? So if earlier you had a stack of 10 things that you could do, you knew that, okay, even if you don't get that much ROI, you're not able to, let's just experiment, let's do this, let's do that. Now, when you're in a situation where you possibly have to let go of staff, you have to let go of key people in your team, and then when you measure that versus should I run some ad campaign or do
Yeah.
some new campaign with a stand-up
Yeah.
comic guy, right?
Sure.
You think about it twice, right? So
Correct.
we will see those spends coming down, and we will see more targeted marketing taking place, right? So instead of
Oh,
just broad sweeps, I think people will really start looking down at who are the customers that are spending money, how do you increase stickiness of those customers on your platform or for your service, and how do you take those decisions, or
yeah.
how do you take those relationships or those engagements deeper and let us spend money on that, because that's where the money is, right? So if someone today has the propensity to spend 100 rupees on me, and
Correct.
they have been, say, over and you will analyze your user base a lot more, right? And therefore try and
Correct.
cut it up, divide it up into niches, and then look at what you want to spend on each of those and how you can get more from each customer that
Yeah.
you have presently, instead of trying to convert a larger base, correct? Because if someone in the best of times was not ordering food from you, it's unlikely that now in the worst of times they're going to start ordering food from you, right? As opposed
True.
to someone who's been more straight line with you. So what can you do more to
Right.
extract value from him or her?
Interesting. So, you mentioned one very interesting fact, like a lot of startups which earlier did, for example, as you gave a very relevant example, engage or do an integration with a stand up comic.
Hmm.
But, this was primarily, if I can understand, was to reach out to a larger audience and with a viewpoint of creating a brand. And I think you would be the best person to explain us and answer what would be the right definition of a brand in case of the startup ecosystem for you. And do you think it is? I mean, how do you? I mean, compare it with achieving stability in your business. So, creating a brand versus achieving a stability, and how would you define creating a brand?
Okay, that's a very wide and loaded question, Bharat. Let me just try and break it up a little bit.
Yeah,
Okay, so a brand
sure.
is nothing more than who you are to your customers, correct? It is the
Correct.
articulation of everything that you embody
Yeah,
as a service or as a product,
yeah,
and where your position is in the life of that customer, correct?
right.
Uh, Now, having said that, there are different ways in which you can build this out. If you're a very early stage startup, I think over there, just everything that you do has to be about your product and service, right? Because
Correct.
that is going to become who you are. So, in that
Hmm.
sense, for a very, very early company, that brand is ephemeral, right? There is no brand
Correct.
per se, except for as a founder, what you want people to see your product or
Sure.
service as. Correct. So, over there, the embodiment of your brand is actually in your product and service. And then
Correct.
as you grow a little bit and more people start using you, recognizing you, you have a stable base of customers, whether they are
Yeah.
B2C or whether they are B2B, is where you can then take a position of wanting to articulate or do more for your customers than just what your immediate product or service does for them, right?
Right.
Which could mean that you then take a slightly larger position of what are you doing, what are, like, the spokes that are coming out of your
Correct.
product or service that you are also capturing, right? So how are you adding more value than just your immediate product or service? So let's take the example of Let's Venture, for instance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our core product or service, and for many, many years, was just helping startups raise funds from angel investors, correct? And that's all we focused on in terms of doing, correct? Which was,
Yeah.
let's have a platform where the best startups and the best founders come, and on the other
Right.
side, let us have the best or the really good angel investors in the ecosystem and a larger tail of investors in the ecosystem ready over
Yeah.
there so that matchmaking can take place, right?
Correct.
So for a long period of time, that was and that was all we were trying to do. We were trying to build a technology platform
Right.
that embodied that and could enable that to take place. And then as that business grew and as that part of our service and product stabilized, is when then the Let's Venture brand itself started taking on an identity of its own, right? So
Sure.
uh, over there we started thinking of how can we do more in this ecosystem, and therefore
Sure.
uh, creating value added content, creating a multitude of products and services for both our investors as well as our startups, right, which is
Correct.
not our core, but we recognize that by doing that we are adding more value to their lives, and by adding more
Yeah.
value to their lives, it comes back to us becoming that one point of recall for everyone, right? So therefore, for
Correct.
us as a brand, it becomes important to look at those extensions and how, in that life of an entrepreneur, life of an investor, they keep thinking of at every time they are at a crucial juncture, how can they
Yeah.
think of you and how can they want to keep coming back to you to meet their services or needs.
Makes sense. So, now coming on to the essential topic of fundraising and hitting the context, and also moving beyond a bit of the Corona discussions, which have already been out there a lot.
Hmm.
So, one essential question that every startup faces, and in the current times, it's extremely relevant because even we get asked this question many times. So, there is this thing where people say that now in the current ecosystem, where ecosystem in India has sort of matured, it is also important to understand who you raise funds from and not just the money. And there's another school of thought which says any money is good money. Obviously the traditional mindset always says that any money is good money and we should never reject money. So as for raising funds for a startup, what would you suggest? Should they look at the people who are also coming on board, or should they only go out and out and try to raise funds? So what would be the right strategy for a startup?
Okay, Bhav. So this is a difficult question. I'll tell you why, right? Because
Yeah.
for an entrepreneur who's building his business and who's say down to the wire, and he knows that this product or service that he really cares about and the team that he's
Correct.
built around this that he really cares about
Yeah.
is not going to survive unless he or she raises money or takes money from someone. For if
Yeah.
you're at that dire stage, then the color of money is not going to matter. Okay.
Correct. Correct.
You having said that, you should try as far as possible to protect yourself
Hmm.
by using a good standardized SHA or a shareholders agreement when you're taking money from investors, correct? And for instance, at Let's Venture, we have open sourced, very standard, good industry practices, right? Both from an
Hmm.
investor as well as from a founder's point of view. So you should always refer to good standard practices, look at what are the standard norms for raising funds, protect
Yeah.
your interests uh, as a founder, and then I would say if you have like the legal documentation of it in place and you're using a good standard SHA, then to a certain extent your interests are protected,
Okay.
and therefore if you are in that very dire situation of you're going to sink or float, you
Correct.
could consider taking money from folks who don't give you a very good vibe, correct?
Sure.
But try to protect your interests as far as possible. If you're not in that situation where it is sink and die,
Yeah.
right? Then you have a little more leeway of actually
Exactly.
choosing the investors that you work with. And I would have said that a year back, it was a founder's market, right?
Correct.
Uh,
Correct.
there are VCs that were typically doing Series B rounds, started doing Series A rounds. The guys who
Yeah.
were doing Series A started doing pre-Series A and even early stage.
Yeah.
And so you were getting, you were spoiled for choice, right?
Correct.
You literally could decide who you wanted on your cap table. who were the investors that you wanted to work with or liked working with. Unfortunately, because of the last 6 months and the pandemic, not just in India but globally, there has been a slowdown as far as investments are concerned.
Correct.
There is, and suddenly the market has flipped, right? So it's become a buyer's market. So the investors have a little bit more of an upper hand in terms of scrutinizing deals more, looking more closely at diligence on deals, and they get to pick or choose startups that they would like to invest in. Correct, because for them it is also very, very important for them to protect their capital, right? Because they are answerable too, right? They have to give returns for their funds, and they cannot be doing crazy deals anymore, right? So that the temptation to take, I would say that people have become a little more risk averse right now. So it is a difficult market to raise funds in, but not to say that it's not happening. So just for instance, on Let's Venture itself, we actually just completed looking at all of our data for the first half of the year. That's January to now, calendar year. We've actually done 44 deals.
Interesting.
44 startups have raised funds on our platform. Just for context, the whole of last year, we did about 55 deals. So we've done a lot more deals half the year. But I will caveat that by saying that the value of those deals is much smaller. Correct? In terms of the gross value raised is much lower. So ticket sizes are lower for each deal. So where typically our sweet spot for doing deals had been between $500,000 to $1 million. That has come down a little more, but we've done a lot more. So people are wanting to do smaller checks to kind of test the market, test the founders, look at how efficient they are in using or utilizing those funds before they can make a bigger bet, right? Having said that, already 10% of the startups that raised in the first half of the year from us have gone on to start raising their next round. Correct? So it's not that deal activity is not happening. I think investors have become a little more cautious, so they are writing smaller checks, which is fair, and they want you to kind of demonstrate what you will do, right, with that money, and then the follow-on funding is of course easier to raise.
Correct.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, to some extent, and I just want to follow it up with another question, which is also very essential for startups to understand that how do you know that it is the right time to raise funds? So the quintessential question that when should you raise funds for your business?
So when you should raise funds for your business, right? There are different kinds of funds that you could raise. So of course, putting in your own savings, doing the friends and families route, and with that, you should very consciously want to at least hit a stage where there is some sort of product market fit, right? Or you at least been able to demonstrate some sort of value generation through your product or service, right? Which is the stage at which an angel investor or a very early stage investor might get interested to look at you, correct? Especially now. So, I mean, if you've been able to demonstrate with a small corpus of friends and family around that you've raised or soft loans that you've taken, I mean, if you're eligible and if you've taken any sort of bank loans, possibly to run your business, and if you're in the manufacturing space, you could possibly have done that as well. And if with that, you've been able to demonstrate that you've been able to sign on at least some clients, you have some sort of visibility on some paying customers for your product or service. And if you're at that stage is when you could possibly look at approaching angel investors or even a platform like ours, right? But I think, especially in the times that we are in, the demonstration of revenue potential, right, is very, very important. So I would say that before you approach, also it depends, Pavas, on different sectors, correct, and different kinds of products that you or
Correct.
services that you might be building. But this is a broad brush stroke. So if you're able to demonstrate that there are paying customers right at the other side, that becomes
Okay.
a good validation for you to then pitch to angel investors and show them the potential of what could possibly come next if you had more funds at your disposal to either make the product stronger or to bring a team on board to kind of build faster to
Right.
be able to then really juice that revenue engine.
Yeah. So, do you think, I mean, as you mentioned, so do you think, like with the popular perception right now, as the ecosystem matured in the last 1 to 2.5 years, do you also think that revenue generation already happening for a startup is a very important measure for investors to look at instead of, how 4 5 years back, idea stage and early stage was a very popular space for funding. But now are investors looking more at already revenue generating startups?
Like I said, potential for revenue and some early markers that there are paying customers at the other side has become important. I will say that.
Mm.
It also depends on what kind of entrepreneur or business you are, right? So if you're someone who's typically has already done a startup which was
Yeah.
acquired or sold, or you exited out of that, and you're
Mm.
starting up for the second time, perhaps it'll be easier
Yeah.
for you to raise funding at a idea stage. And
Correct.
I'm not just talking about like the big unicorn level folks who start up again, but
Right.
even smaller, even smaller companies that have had exits, and there is something over there for the investors to feel that okay, he or she already built and scaled to a certain extent, and
Correct.
I'm really convinced with this idea. Then possibility of them wanting to put in money at an idea stage exists, but I think for all of us lesser mortals who are doing this for the very first time, you need to show something. You need to show
Sure.
something.
Sure. And just to understand this better, so what would you say are the top three, four, or whatever you think are the most important must-haves in a pitch deck that investors usually look at?
Okay, so your pitch deck is actually should just be the most honest retelling of where you are as a business and what you see as the future potential of your business, right? Uh,
Right.
so in that sense, I mean, it is not about how should I say this delicately? It should not be about like I know sometime back, if you
Yeah.
look at pitch decks from 2013 or even before that, 2012, 13, e-commerce pitch decks, right? Market
Yeah.
size was 1 billion Indians. That
Correct.
is, and we have now realized that is not the market size
Yeah.
of e-commerce in India, right? 1 billion Indians
Absolutely.
is not the market size. It's perhaps the large market size, but what is your actual addressable market?
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
idea is that the whole ecosystem is also mature. People understand some of these things a lot better. So I would say that in your pitch deck, avoid like hyperbole. I think the more honest you can keep the conversation. That's not to say
Yeah.
that you should undersell what
Correct.
you're doing. You have to add that little bit of enigma, right, to everything. But
Right.
avoid the hyperbole because I think people are able to see through that a lot more easily now. And it should just, like I said, I think the cornerstone is the honesty of your pitch.
Hmm.
Correct. Now, having
Hmm.
said that, a couple of things that should definitely be in your pitch deck is the articulation of what is the problem that you're solving, right? What is not what your product or service is doing, but what is the problem that you
Yeah.
are actually solving. Uh,
Hmm.
and with that, I think it's very important to also say why you, or by you, I mean your founding team,
Yeah.
if you have co-founders or you have an early team in place, why you guys are the best people to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
Because I think somewhere, at any given point of time, Powers, there are multiple people working on the same idea, right?
Of course, of
Uh,
course.
because I think if it's a pain point that's out there that has been experienced, it's not that you've experienced it alone. Bunch of
Yeah,
other very intelligent people have also experienced it, right?
yeah,
And everyone, a lot of people at any given point of time might be trying to solve it. So the articulation of the problem and why you, as a team, are the best people to solve
mm,
that problem. Those two things are important. After that, you know, giving a sense of the market size, giving the sense of where you are right now, what are
yeah,
your metrics and what are your numbers looking like now,
yeah,
and how you see that scaling and growing. Showing that is important.
sure.
Correct. Those are, I think, those are some of the things that should be articulated uh, very, very strongly. And you should spend time actually in preparing your pitch deck, right? And uh, take it out to people,
Yeah,
and really listen to the questions that you get asked. And then when
yeah,
you make the next version of it, try to make sure that those questions are answered
yeah,
in your pitch deck before they get asked to you, right?
correct.
Because you don't want to ever appear defensive on anything. So,
Yeah,
and some of these things you really need to think about, right? It's not that you have all the answers at the top of your mind. So, I
yeah,
think I think the first 10 or 15 times you do your pitch,
sure.
to investors, or even to a circle of people who are your mentors or advisors. Really listen to the questions that you're being asked and then try and have those, if possibly, answered within the framework of your pitch deck itself.
Interesting. So, also, very interestingly, I mean, you have been in the best of both the worlds. So, I would want to ask this question to you: that do you think PR and media coverage and all of those things are essential part of fundraising? Because a lot of startups only do PR with the objective of coming in the eyes or meeting the eyes of investors. So, is has that become a part and parcel of the fundraise process? And should a startup invest on initial PR to sort of get in touch with investors?
Mm, okay. Let me see how I can best answer this.
Yeah,
Will any investor invest in your company because he read an article or watched a story about you? Unlikely. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
will he, uh, if the story was done really well,
yeah.
will he approach someone for an introduction to you? Maybe.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay,
correct. I've had that happen, seen that happen multiple times in
interesting.
my career, where
Hmm.
um, sometimes on the back of really well written or very well articulated stories,
Yeah,
sometimes there was interest and people asked for an introduction or to
yeah,
know more about a particular startup or company.
yeah,
Mm. Having said that, is it good to be sort of visible?
hmm.
Sometimes I would say yes, it is good, but really think about why you're becoming visible.
Right.
Correct. So over there, you perhaps need really good help from PR agencies or other advisors to help you out in what you are communicating, right? I don't think
Yeah,
it's really helpful just to be out there all the time. I think because if you're
correct.
out there too much, then people kind of stop seeing you, right? That
Exactly.
happens. It's a real phenomena, right? Like if you're there
Yeah.
everywhere, after a while, people just kind of don't see you, right? Because
Hmm.
you're everywhere. So
Yeah.
either you have a lot of money to spend or
Yeah.
waste uh,
Yeah.
on PR, or
Yeah.
that people might actually think you're already really well capitalized if you're spending that
Yeah.
much money on media and appearances and PR. That then do you really want my money? And as an investor, I think of, do I really want to give my money so it goes into a virtuous cycle
Correct.
media? So really think about what you want to articulate about yourself, and
Yeah.
really pick and choose that, I think, more carefully than wanting to blanket be there everywhere, right? I don't think that's very helpful.
Interesting. So we'll pick a couple of audience questions before we move further, so that we keep addressing them. One question that we have received in multiple ways and different words is simply people are asking, once the funds are raised, what are the first key areas that the fund should be allocated to? So where should the money go in the initial rounds? For example, the seed capital or the early stage capital. What would be the right investments to make?
It depends on what you're building, and it goes back to actually answering the question of why you raise the funds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you should have actually known that before you were raising the money on where you would first spend it on. So if
Yeah.
you're in a situation where you have raised the money and then you don't know, that means I'll be very surprised you got the money in the first place, right?
Right.
Investors will not give you the money if they feel that you're not clear about what you're going to do with it, which means that
Yeah.
you'll end up wasting it, which means you'll end up wasting your time and energies and resources, right?
Yeah.
So that question really needs to be answered first, right? So
Right.
you really need to know that um, if I raise this money, and okay, so just typically, right, some of the things that you will want to use the funds for is perhaps bringing on team members or talent. So, say for example, you're building, see, an AI product, right? You're trying to build something which is core AI, and right now with limited funding, you've been able to afford only a certain level of talent, right? And you really know
Yeah.
that you need a senior talent to really make the best of, or really scale up your capabilities over there. So you
Yeah.
depend on bringing in a team
Yeah.
and making the product more refined. Say,
Yeah.
for example, you're a B2C thing, and say you're, I don't know, you're a B2C brand,
Correct.
right? Well, let's take the example of Beardo, right? They
Yeah. Yeah.
recently exited to Marico. Uh, I don't know their story fully, but I'm assuming that the early funding that they raised, they would have
Mm.
actually spent on their distribution
Sure.
network, right? Their retail distribution, perhaps, and
Correct.
their marketing and advertising, because it's important for people to
Of
recognize their
course.
brand and see their brand. So I'm just, it's a hypothesis. I don't know whether that's what they did, but I'm just trying to say that if you're that kind of company,
Yeah.
that is perhaps where you would use some of your funding, right? Is on retail distribution,
Sure.
marketing, advertising, that might need to get done. If you're like a core technology product, then you might use it on building out your team, and therefore being able to meet all the features on your product roadmap faster, so that your
Yeah.
product becomes more compelling for
Yeah.
your users. Correct? So yeah, but this question needs to be
Yeah.
answered before, right? It's one of the things in your pitch deck. Yeah, towards the
Yeah.
end of your pitch deck, if you have like a 10 page slide, one of the important slides is how you're going to use those funds, right?
Correct.
And you will be questioned on it
Yeah.
very often, right? Because
Of course.
investors, you also have to understand that investors have seen, they do this every day, right? They
Sure.
see literally hundreds of decks, and if they feel that something over there is amiss,
Yeah.
then that becomes a red flag for them. Like for
Interesting. So another,
hmm.
yeah. So another question that we have received is, I mean, it's a question that we have received in Hindi. So कम पैसों के साथ early stage में brand बनाने के लिए कोई tips, ma'am? So early stage में कम पैसे खर्च करके any tips to create a brand or at least start moving in the direction of brand building and marketing? Any hacks or tips for that? Or probably we could also look at it in a way of early customer acquisition when
Hmm.
you don't have
Hmm.
huge monies
Hmm.
to spend, so
Right.
that would be more relevant.
Um, Without spending too much money. Right, you actually don't need to spend too much money for very early branding marketing, right? It should ideally come from your existing customers.
Okay.
So testimonials can be very, very important,
Hmm.
right? Being a little, I don't like using the word, but being a little shameless about asking people to plug your
Correct.
product
Of
or your
course.
service, correct? And I find very many times we feel shy, but
Hmm.
people will do it in a second, right?
Yeah.
Your early customers, find a way to have that feedback loop with your early users and customers and make
Hmm.
them your brand custodians, right?
Hmm.
Uh, get them to tweet about you or talk about you on Facebook, or find interesting ways in which you can show um, the product reviews. Say, for example, you're selling a product on Amazon, for instance, right?
Yeah.
You don't have your own channel yet, and you're seeing that you're getting really good reviews there. Find a way in which you could build a small in-house campaign around it, right? You could snapshot those, you could take it from there and put it on Instagram or put it on Facebook. You could reach out to some of those customers and ask them to shoot a small story about how they are using your product,
Yeah.
right? I've had requests like that come to me, and
Yeah.
sometimes you really love those products, and you're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it for you, right? Why would I
Correct.
not do it for you?
Yeah.
Like say, so there was a company that makes really nice handmade toys for children,
Oh wow. Okay.
and I was using them, and they reached out and said, ma'am, we noticed, could you write a testimonial for us, or could you shoot a small video testimonial for us? And
Right.
I said, sure, I'll do it. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
customer. I love your product. My daughter enjoys them.
Yeah.
Uh, and so really, so these things don't cost any money, right?
Correct.
These things are simple. Similarly, if you're on the B2B side,
Yeah.
right, and you have, say, 4 or 5 people that have subscribed to your SaaS product and are
Yeah.
using it,
Yeah.
ask them to give you testimonials. Then you have to think about intelligently how you're going to make that message spread out, right, on whatever the channels that are relevant, right? So, like,
Yeah.
say your company is an HR product, a payroll product, for instance, and you get the HR head of that organization to write a small testimonial for you, and you
Yeah.
request them to put it on their LinkedIn. Now, that HR head is obviously, like, his or her peer network is other HR guys,
Yeah.
right? So you're going to get visibility from there. 10 people will see it. Out of 10, maybe
Yeah.
like 3 will reach out to you, and maybe you can convert one.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So those are some of the
Interesting.
things that I can just think of off the top of my mind that are easy enough to do. The other thing that I would say is over
Hmm.
here, perhaps, you could try to connect with media in a way where avoid the PR agency route because that will cost you money. But
Correct.
try and see journalists who are writing stories about your beat. So, like, if your product or service is in the healthcare space, or if you're
Yeah.
in any of these spaces, it's easy enough to figure out ki, CNBC में which is the journalist who's doing this, या
Right.
हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स में कौन से जर्नलिस्ट हैं जो इसके बारे में लिखते हैं. Reach out
Right.
to them, send them a note about your product or service, try and try and tie it to the news cycle, right?
Hmm.
That becomes very important when you're trying to do this thing organically, right? A lot of
Correct.
founders say ki, nahi hota, like people don't pick up, is
Hmm.
also because, it's unfortunate, but any journalist, especially covering the technology startup space, gets so many pitches, right, that it's difficult
Yeah.
to keep track. What becomes important is to contextualize it within a
The
certain
current news and everything.
current news cycle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, for example, if you have an insurance product, uh,
Right.
let's say, right, not insurance product, okay, let's take insurance as an example.
Yeah.
Now is a good
Yeah.
time, right? People are perhaps
Yeah.
more worried about their health or the welfare of their family and are likely
Right.
to take more insurance. You can, and if you have good numbers, say if you've seen a spike up in the last 6 months,
Yeah.
and you've been able to crunch that data nicely, you can take that, to a journalist who's covering that space or beat and say that, hey, we are one of these
Yeah.
startups who's seen a massive spike up, and
Correct.
you might want to consider including us in any story that you are doing in this
Yeah.
space. And I think so. There has to be a clarity of thought at your end, because I don't think
Mm.
anyone from the outside can give you that.
Yeah.
You need to think about that a little bit.
Interesting. That was very insightful for early stage startups. In fact,
Yeah,
I think those were really actionable points that you
yeah,
can actually start right away with. So they were really
yeah,
actionable from that perspective.
yeah.
So one thing, a couple of our participating startups are also in extreme, hardcore B2B space.
Hmm.
For example, like data analytics for other companies, and one is into SaaS for building SaaS products for corporates. So just wanted to touch upon this quickly. Any fundraising tips or strategies that you would give to hardcore B2B startups, or probably any pitch deck specifications that are very very specific for B2B startups. So how would you, what would you suggest to a B2B startup out there raising funds?
So I'll just say that this is not like I'm not like some expert in this area, right?
Yeah,
So I'm just going to use a little bit of common sense lens on this. So um, please feel free to discount anything I'm saying. Um, but from a pitch deck point of view, I think in the B2B space, what becomes important is to show. And this actually, came to me, and I was part of a session actually where one of the investors was talking about this. So I think in the B2B space, what's important is to talk about, how you're going to look at unit economics building up until you hit a certain revenue,
sure.
right? So how is the product going to be priced? How are you going to distribute the product? And how are
Yeah,
you, because in the B2B space, unlike in the B2C space, you know already the market that, or the customers that you are going after, right?
yeah,
You can make a list of them, literally, right? And look at
yeah,
within this space or within this industry. So if you're a data analytics company that's working in the education space, for instance, right?
mm,
Or if you're, say, if you're a company that's building some sort of back-end technology to be used by schools.
yeah,
Okay, like let's just take that example. A lot of
yeah.
schools are now having to go online, and
Correct.
you've built a product that will help them better manage their operations in an online
Yeah,
environment. You actually should know that whole market, right? You should, and say you start with a certain geography. So you're based in Bangalore. So you say, I'm going to do all schools in Bangalore, and I'm going to do all schools in Mysore. And then you are building that out. So having that
right.
roadmap and that clarity for investors that you've studied this market, which is anyway a limited market, right? A large market, possibly if you're looking to go global as well, but you've analyzed it, you know what your funnel pipeline is, you know what you're going to be, what you're going to price the product at for different tiers
Right.
of schools, and that you've done a lot of that thinking becomes important, right? And to
Yeah,
show how are you going to, in a B2B, for a B2B startup, how you're going to get to, say, $1 million in ARR, right?
yeah,
How many years is it going to take you? And what is your strategy in getting there?
yeah,
Uh, could be important points that investors would like to see or like to know, because it's a little more in control than in a B2C space. The other question over here was, sorry, on the B2B thing. One was what the investors might be looking for, or how do you address their concerns, and what was the other
yeah.
one?
So the other aspect of it was just any specifics for pitch deck inclusions for B2B startups.
So I think on the same lines, right? Showing
Yeah,
them the market, showing them what you're looking at in terms of pricing,
yeah,
potential for your product or service. How are you going to be able to scale that up? What is going to be your unit economics as you get to, say, $1 million in ARR? right, where the whole B2B play starts becoming meaningful. And then
Yeah.
there is, of course, network effects that will kick in as well. So I think these are the couple of things that might be important in the B2B space. But let me see if we can pull out some more targeted information on this, and maybe I can share it with you and you can circulate
Sure.
it to folks later.
That'll be amazing. So, one question we have received, I think broadly you have answered this, but any quick, insight on what has to be the focus after initial funding, whether it should be revenue generation or spending on marketing and building a brand. So, for probably, I think for a team which is lean and focused on certain activities, should they directly go into revenue generation when they raise the first round of fund initially, or should they focus on spending it on marketing and building a brand, which is like the general norm among startups?
It would depend, Powers, how important it is, the building of the brand and the marketing. How much of it is it going to contribute back to your revenue generation, right? So it should
Yeah,
not just be like an exercise in vanity that
yeah,
we are all over the place now and wow, everyone knows us.
yeah,
It's not going to matter if that is not converting to people actually buying your product or using your service, and so on, right? So
yeah,
using the first money to actually take your product and make it really, really strong, make your offering really, really strong, I
yeah,
think is very, very important. And then, a lot of his branding and marketing and all can be a subset of that and can be
yeah,
done more judiciously as you build yourself out. But I think this also depends on case to case, right?
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so one question that to bring it to a close, and I think it would be very important to understand what is the right strategy to reach out to investors. So how does a startup, a young startup, reach out to investors? What are the strategies? Where to find investors, and how to find them? Yeah,
Okay. So it's unfortunate, but not just in India, just everywhere in the world, right? Warm introductions matter.
yeah,
So try and find through your existing network who can help you with an introduction. And when I say an introduction, someone who will write a line or two explaining why they know you. So, a lot of people feel like, मैं LinkedIn के through, first I will connect with someone who I'm
yeah,
a second connect to. Then I will ask that second connect person to make the connect. But it
yeah.
just becomes like, but dude, I don't even know you. Like, what am I going to say about you? And how am
Of
I going
course.
to introduce you to someone else, right?
Yeah,
So actually try and find within your network and don't be shy about it, right?
sure.
Everyone does it. So you should do it too. Try
Yeah.
and find people in your network who will help you with warm introductions.
Mm.
The other thing is that once having done that, so maintain relationships, right? This whole ecosystem is a lot about relationships that you maintain. So don't avoid, using and trashing. That's never a good thing. Try
Yeah,
and keep those relationships warm. Uh, and not be very transactional about it as far as possible. Having said that, a lot of this ambiguity of where you don't have networks has
yeah.
become, inconsequential because of so many platforms being available now. So, of course, Let's Venture is one of them. And there are so many others that are
Mm.
available now, right? There's Venture Catalyst, there's Let's Venture, there is Angel List.
Yeah,
Of course, you have the offline networks. So you have Indian Angel Network, you have Mumbai Angels, you have the. So apply through all of those networks. It's time consuming.
mm.
And you might feel कि, भैया ये क्या हो रहा है, right? I'm spending so much time on this, but it is time taking. Fundraising is time taking. So, uh, go through all of those networks as well.
Sure.
Have your pitch deck ready before that so it becomes easier
Yeah.
even for the introductions to happen, very often, like before I introduce to someone,
Yeah.
I want to see, right, who or why I'm introducing. Like, to some
Yeah.
extent, I need to be at least like a 50% convinced about you before I refer you to someone else, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want that person to think कि यार साइना ये क्या है like,
Of
why you
course.
planning, right? So you have
Yeah.
to understand that those relationships are delicate, right?
Yeah.
All our relationships are delicate, and
Yeah.
we are all wary of perhaps overutilizing them at times.
Sure.
But having said that, there is a lot of channels for you to go through
Yeah.
to raise funds. Of course, there is. I don't know if you're very early stage, then perhaps going through the incubator accelerator networks is also useful. That's a good place for you to meet peer networks, connect. Very often at least the good accelerator incubator programs. I'm sorry, I think there's some disturbance, but I hope.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. Your voice is clear.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Very often at those incubator accelerator programs, at least the good ones, right? A lot of investors will come there to run sessions or to do speaking engagements or to do one-on-one sessions or programs, and that might be a good place
Right.
for you to meet these people, right, and become a little more visible to them. But
Yeah.
having said that, go to an accelerator incubator only if you need it, right?
Correct.
Don't,
Correct.
because everything takes up time, right? So somewhere you need to make that, and you will know yourself, right? If you're someone who is just completely disconnected from this entire space and you actually have no connections, then
Mm.
it might be useful to explore some of these channels to try and build up a network. But if you
Yeah.
feel that you already have a little bit of a network, then try and use that and explore that as much as you can.
Interesting. Interesting. I think one point that you made, and I really like it, is that when we are making connections, I mean, it is very important to understand that it's no less than endorsing someone. So, like you said, I mean, those relationships are very delicate, and you would not want to endorse someone you don't really believe in. So I
Yeah.
think that's very important when we are asking someone for a reference.
Yes.
So that is very interesting. So, China, any parting note from your end for all the startups, especially the early stage startups, because they are the maximum numbers that listen to us and follow us. So, any parting word to the early stage startups who are just starting out?
I would say that really, times are a little difficult and they're a little tough. Entrepreneurs' journey, even in the best of times, is not easy,
Yeah.
right? And we are not in the best of times now. So have a lot of clarity of thought on why you're doing, what you're building, what problem you're trying to solve. And
Sure.
I think, that clarity of thought is today very important.
Correct.
Correct. Because it's not going to be easy to build all the pieces and bring all the pieces together. But having said that, it's also a good time because unfortunately, with all of the layoffs that we see happening and all of that, there is really good talent, really good people that are going to become available to you now, right, as an entrepreneur to work with.
Yeah.
Uh, and that, building a really good team early on is, I think that's,
Yeah.
I think Pavas, you can also talk about it, right? That is the very most
Yeah.
important thing. And this time might actually be a good time to do that. Get really good talent and people who are really hungry to join you and work with you together. That will help you build your product faster and all of that. But I think if I could just leave everyone with one thought is,
Yeah.
um, money is tight, everyone's time and bandwidth is tight. So clarity of thought, right? Think, be mindful,
Yeah.
that's important.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway would be, to right now the best advice is, as you said, and just, extending it is to stay put and just be patient and maintain your mental peace, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a very difficult time to be in. But Saina, thanks a lot for taking out time
Thank
for
you.
us. And it was a pleasure chatting with you. I'm sure a lot of people would be able to, get some really good actionable points from several of those answers. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys. Feel free. There's actually a lot of content on the Let's Venture blog around fundraising. There is a very, very detailed FAQ section where, for very early founders, if y'all are confused about some very basics around fundraising, y'all can go and check that out. Like I mentioned, there are lots of open source documents that you can use, right? Because very often, if you're a first time founder, you've never even seen a shareholder
Right.
agreement in your life, right? You're like, you don't even know what
Right.
that is or what you could do with it. So
Yeah.
check out content on Let's Venture and hope it's useful for y'all in
Yeah.
decision making.
I think what we can also do is just share the link across all our participants and everyone who's interested, and then obviously, I mean, people would be very happy to reach out to you as well.
Yeah, it's actually just blog.letsventure.com. I can if,
Perfect.
is there a chat window available? Yeah, I'll just put it here.
Yeah. Also, what we can do is we can also add it in the comment of our live streams so that all the people can see it. We'll do that. No problem.
I'm not.
Thanks a lot, Sayana.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Powers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.